All right, Dolphins fans, I've been looking forward to this particular training camp battle video. Most importantly, because there are going to be some good nuggets to be had in this particular video. You look at the Dolphins defensive line, interior defensive line, and we're going to get to it and everything. But the thing that you already know, and that's going to be highlighted and pointed out even more so, is behind those top three guys that we have, man, is it just filled with question marks. And that's where a couple of these additional nuggets are going to pop in. But before I jump into today's action, let's hear from you. Your thoughts on the Dolphins' interior defensive line as we get set for training camp. Rookies going to be reporting soon. Veterans coming in at the end of the month. But let's jump right in as we have been doing. We're not going to have to spend a ton of time on this particular graphic here. And you'll see, actually, this defensive line is a little bit different compared to the other positions I did, because I've got it always as projected starters and then guys that are more so solidified as backups, and then a class of guys that are more so battling for backup spots and battling for roster spots in general. The interior defensive line doesn't really have that. It doesn't warrant that. As we stated from the beginning, you got the projected starters, and that's kind of it for solidified guys at this position. It's Wilkins, it's Sieler, it's Davis. And if you look at those guys, all of those guys being in contract years. So it's like we need to start grooming some people behind this. The guys behind these guys aren't not important. I don't mean it by that any means. But what I'm saying is this position, as it stands right now, really relies on these guys, which isn't a bad thing, because this trio, Wilkins, Sieler, both of those guys accumulated over 70 tackles last year. Wilkins flirted with 100. I believe he had 16 tackles for a loss. The guy was absolutely just dominating every single thing that he did last year, except, and I know a lot of people will point this out, if there's one maybe fault to his game or one thing he could improve on, it's that interior pass rush. He doesn't get the sack totals that some of the other guys that we're seeing get these big high dollar figures right now, the Jeffrey Simmons, the Quinnen Williams of the world. So we'll have to see how the whole contract thing plays out. But if there's one maybe fault to Wilkins' game, it's that he's not a dominant interior pass rusher. Well, at the end of the day, Vic Fangio loves what he's going to be able to do with this guy. One of the favorites that's going to be on this defense for any coach, just because of his production and the effort that he puts in, the locker room presence that he has. But these are your three. I'm not breaking any news here. It's Wilkins, it's Davis, it's Sieler. Those are your guys that are going to get the bulk of the snaps. But where these nuggets are going to start coming in a little bit more is when we look at these guys that are battling for the backup role, battling for a roster spot. You got Jaylen Twyman, you got Josiah Bronson, Pili, Anthony Montalvo. I've got a nugget here, and this isn't the nugget that I was referring to earlier, but this is more so a stat. Of those four guys, they combined for 8 tackles in 7 career games played, and that's because of Josiah Bronson. He makes up for all the stats. He's the only one that has accumulated a stat in that list of backups. He's entering his 3rd season. Twyman's entering his 2nd season. And then Montalvo and Pili are undrafted free agents. And there's some hope for these undrafted free agents. Pili, the one that's pictured right there, a lot of people thought he was going to be drafted. Some things that went on at USC with some injuries and whatnot. We don't have to go into all that today. There's still hope for him. There's a chance that he makes this team. He can be one of those big body run clogging guys, kind of like in that Raekwon Davis role. So he's going to be battling for that position. And I think there's a chance that he can prove it and make it. We'll see throughout training camp here. Once we start getting a little bit more of the contact, once we start getting some of the pads on, when we start really getting into the action where you can judge offensive line play, defensive line play out of the running backs. You can judge that a little bit better in training camp than you could in OTAs and minicamp, and then obviously with the preseason games as well. But where I'm going, where the nuggets come in, where I sort of probably buried the lead a little bit, is because of all of the inexperience of the guys that are listed here. The Miami Dolphins, this isn't really out there yet. I haven't seen anything being reported. My connection, my contact that has the connection with the team, no contracts has been made to my knowledge to these guys, but the Miami Dolphins are in conversations at least with. They're knocking on doors. They're talking to people. And those people include Akeem Hicks and Ndamukong Suh. And then at another position, but still kind of relative to the defensive line, Jadeveon Clowney as well. But what they're really hoping to do here, more so than anything, is see how training camp plays out. This team wants training camp to have that barometer to see how these guys are doing. They know what they're going to get out of Wilkins, Davis, and Sieler. Those aren't question marks. Those are you can step it, you connect it. Those are your snap getters as the roster stands right now. But they want to see, how does Pili stand up? How does Bronson stand up? How does Twyman stand up? What do they have in these guys? Because if they don't like what they're seeing, the groundwork has been laid with a guy like Ndamukong Suh and with Akeem Hicks. And like I said, it's nothing to my knowledge at this point in time that's contract related. It's just like, hey, what's your interest level? Where are you standing right now? Let's just have this conversation. In case the time comes, we can have more of these conversations. We can already have built a little bit of the groundwork. So those conversations are happening. The Dolphins are not comfortable with what they have behind Sieler, behind Wilkins, behind Raekwon Davis. So like I said, I sort of buried the lead there more than anything, but that's what we're going to learn in training camp. With the battles at this position, those first three are set. The next four that we listed, that's where your battle's going to come, because you got to have more bodies at this position. We need more depth at this position. And I tell you what, like I said, 8 tackles, 7 career games between those 4, and it's all by one person. We're going to need a few more veteran bodies. And you could make a claim that adding a guy like Hicks or Ndamukong Suh, if we were to have an injury to a guy like Zach Sieler or Christian Wilkins or Raekwon Davis, those snaps that a guy like that could eat up and really be a proven force at that position compared to a guy like Brandon Pili, that's invaluable. That could be just as big, if not bigger, than a potential signing of a guy like Dalvin Cook. So while it's not as sexy, it doesn't have the I don't even want to say a young player vibe, but it's not like a guy you're going to build around for the future. It is potentially a huge piece to a Dolphins team that is in win now mode. So that's the biggest nugget from this, is we'll see how things play out right away in training camp. And I tell you what, if you see the Dolphins reported around, they're interested in Hicks, they're interested in Suh, it's because these other guys, there's not quite a trust level that has been built up yet. But that is what I've got for the interior defensive line. Go ahead, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's carry on the conversation there. We'll be back with the next position. I'm not quite sure which one I had on my list, but I'm going to be recording it right away. We're going to try to get through as many of these as possible leading up to training camp. That's my time for this one, Miami Dolphins fans. Until next time, Fins